Fake abolitionist. Today we're going to talk about abolitionism, which a lot of people have taken that word over the many years since the 1800s, and they have turned it into many different things. And we're going to talk about its roots. A lot of them want to refer to the roots of abolitionism to say this is what the word means, this is what it is. But I'm sorry to tell you, most of the people using the word abolitionism, if it isn't for slavery itself, you're out of context. Now you say, well, it just means abolishing. Okay, that's fine. But to claim to have the roots to abolitionism, you might be wrong. Now, I say might because it depends on how people take this. I'm going to use two examples of two different movements that I see are using the term abolitionism, of course, other than myself. I'm using the term abolitionism, and I want to make it very clear that I do not, and I say this in several interviews, I am not twisting the words of the abolitionists who were preaching or sharing or educating people about abolitionism. Some of them did it through religious means, some of them didn't. Some of them did it through politics, some of them didn't. There was many different people, but they were all tackling slavery. And they were particularly tackling chattel slavery in the 1800s, the 19th century. And of course, there's many different individuals who are a part of that cause, and many of them I have in my book back here, Slavery Gone for Good. So I take for heart this word abolitionism and say this is a very powerful term. I have many videos on my channel talking about this term, and I actually do not take any different angle from the abolitionists of the past. They were talking about chattel slavery, but they were also talking about other forms of slavery. And we cannot forget that. So when I look at the other people who are using the term abolitionism, I simply have to ask the question, are they doing the same? Now, this is just accountability on my behalf of sharing the history and using the term. Of course, it doesn't really make a huge difference in my view. It matters what they're doing with that term. It matters what they're actually trying to achieve. Now, I'm going to go over the first one, and this is prison reform. So a lot of people talk about, well, the prison system is corrupt. The prison system has slavery in it. And therefore, because of the slavery within the prison system, that's the reason why we should abolish the prison system. We see how it fails so many people. And I think that's a very, very good point. And it's focusing on morality, which is fantastic. But the thing I have to say to those abolitionists is, well, who created the prison system? Who's in control of the prison system? If you're trying to reform the prison system, well, think again, abolitionism means abolish. You need to abolish and get to the root of what you're abolishing. Is it the prison system, or is it the governments which hold victimless crimes, who do not, understand right versus wrong, with all the many people who uphold those governments who do not understand their rights, who are giving it away, who are giving away their ownership, who are allowing their fellow man to be jailed. Back then, the abolitionists would fight for somebody who would be jailed for victimless crimes, They would deliver pamphlets, they would have newspapers, they would educate people. There wouldn't be any politics involved for the most part. Some people, of course, want to. They think politics is the answer to everything. But is it? It's a contradiction if law is upholding slavery as it did in the 1800s, and now if law is upholding slavery in this other form. It is no surprise law is essentially connected to it, and that's why, again, I do not twist the words of the former abolitionists, which many of them were anarchists. It was no surprise, or many of them were so-called no-governmentist men. The Wikipedia and other sources will call them just to say they're not anarchist. But, they're Christian non-resistance, they're Christian pacifists, or whatever term they want to use. They'll say socialist and individualist and capitalist, all sorts of terms. It don't matter. They were tackling slavery. They were all on the same page regarding that issue. They had different means of getting there. Of course, that's how people do things. And when people organize, there's always going to be disputes. That's natural, right? And that's like me right now saying, well, this form of abolitionism, is it really abolitionism? So I just want people to get to the root of what abolitionism is. It's about ending slavery. And it's a moral issue, and slavery is virtually connected to government. If you don't think that's the case, I'll leave a playlist in the description below. You have to look deeper at these issues if you really care about them. And of course, I can share more about it because a lot of these abolitionist groups seem pretty open-minded, or at least they talk about a lot of issues. They tend to speak their minds. They may have podcasts and books and resources and graphics. I mean, really, some of them have gone all out. And some of them have straight up taken all the terms that the former abolitionists were using. And hey, I'm a culprit to that too, but I don't think I'm twisting their words at all. That's the thing. You know, you might say some abolitionists, I'm twisting their words, but there are a lot of other abolitionists, like, I'm not twisting their words. They were the main ones who comprised of the movement and who made most of the impact that we can see perhaps in history. But of course, it was a movement of many, many people. So, you know, who am I to judge? I think the prison reform people, great job if you're watching my content. I saw some people see me using the term abolitionism and they wrote comments under some of my videos. So if you're watching, well, thank you. I, however, suggest looking deeper at the problem. Now, let's look at the second case of scenario where I see abolitionism being used as a term. That is abortions. Some people are saying, well, we need to abolish abortions. They're not using abolitionism as a term instead of abortions because essentially they kind of sound similar, right? It's like get rid of something. But they're using it as a means to say get rid of abortions. And, you know, this network can be pretty darn huge as well around the world. Or at least they have a lot of materials about it, like I said. And this, again, I have no problem with it if it's educational. I'm not sure, however, though, much they want to look at politics, because now we're straying away from what slavery is. We're not looking at slavery anymore. Now, if you're saying you're enslaving a child by putting them under a violent circumstance at birth, you can make that case. Sure, but then there's a lot of other things you'd have to look at if you're going to say that's slavery. There's a lot of other forms of slavery you'd have to look at. So I would suggest to those individuals, how could you define slavery to begin with? Are you focusing on slavery if that is the root cause of the problem? You know, if you're using abolitionism as sort of this term to say, well, this is a good moral framework to say, well, we shouldn't murder anybody, including infants or whatever, in the case of abortions, then, you know, I have no problem with that. You know, education's great. But let's not forget that the abolitionists were talking about slavery in a lot of different forms. And yeah, prison system, land systems as well. You know, there was the free land, the free love movement as well, the come outers movement as well. A lot of people don't know about this. And there was a lot of different movements around that time period. You see a lot of philosophies also arising in the 1800s. So, of course, you can probably make a justification that there were some people even then talking about abortions. But because there really wasn't many people talking about it, is it really about abolitionism? Can you really say abolitionism is about abortions? Or can you say it's really about the prison system? I'm sorry to tell you, it's literally just about slavery. It's just about morality. And so if you're not teaching what morality is directly, what slavery is directly, what are you teaching? You're teaching one symptom of the problem, you know, and you can trace it back down, like I said, to morality or slavery, but that is what you need to look at. So I would hope that these groups are educating people about those issues, and I would challenge them to look deeper at their own philosophy and the own terminology that they're using. And to say, well, wait, there's more to abolitionism than just this. I can say abolish traffic meters, abolish taxes. I could say and I could come up with a billion forms of abolitionism, but ultimately it's one abolitionism, you see? So I would hope that the abortion crowd, the anti-abortion crowd, and the anti-prison system crowd would come together when they can define what abolitionism is. Otherwise, well, wait, they're both using the same term, but totally disagree with each other. That doesn't seem right. And they both claim to have the history on their side and all the abolitionists on their side. That doesn't seem so right to me. So I like to look at exactly what slavery is by its nature. I don't even much like to rely on history. But unfortunately, the government has a huge toll and a huge connection to slavery since its very foundation. And so as we saw the moral revolution, the moral evolution of humanity through the many ages, we've seen abolitionism take place for a number of things. And you could say prohibition is another form of moral revolution in the 1900s, you know. But that didn't go so well necessarily, and there were a lot of problems with it, and prohibition's not abolitionism. Notice they made a separate word for it. You might want to do that one day instead of just borrowing words from the past, because I come up with words of my own when I need to, but this is very fitting. Abolitionism, in the terminology that I'm using, at least the way I see it, I'm literally looking at slavery. I'm literally defining what slavery is. I'm literally talking about their quotes, the abolitionists of the past, who call themselves that, who originated the term. And so, yeah, I don't think I'm really spinning anything. But hey, if you disagree, I'm open to the conversation. I always am. It's kind of funny because if somebody's watching this and they're an anarchist, which is what I refer to as an abolitionist, a real anarchist, meaning an archon, no rulers, not no rules, to realize that no masters and no slaves is freedom. And again, abolitionism is supposed to be about freedom. If we understand that there could be fake forms or people using the term in different ways, well, it's no surprise when you see that with anarchism as well, right? And some of them may use anarchism and they add a string word to it, anarcho-capitalism, anarcho-communism, but at the end of the day, you would hope that they would agree on anarchism, but they don't always, and they stray away from what anarchism actually is. They stray away from the foundations that make it anarchism. So I'm here simply holding the abolitionist accountable because, sorry, there is just no perfect word in the world. So here you go. There are fake abolitionists out there, just as there are fake anarchists out there, as Mark Pasher did his whole presentation on fake anarchists. I recommend checking it out. He, too, says focus on the morality. That's what it's about. That's what it's intended to represent. That's what it means by its definition. I mean, literally, you could also look up the word abolitionism in the dictionary, and now it says specifically the act of abolishing something, but specifically slavery, But of course, since it refers to an action of abolishing, I guess you can make the justification for just about anything. And that's the only problem that perhaps you can see with abolitionism versus anarchism. Anarchism is a little bit more direct, but there's a lot of other problems with anarchism. And if you're curious about that, I did a video called Why Abolitionism is Preferable to Voluntarism or Real Holistic Anarchism. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope individuals can get a deeper sense as to what the terms they are using are actually meant to represent. And of course, I ever grow in my understanding by the day. I understand the nuances in the different abolitionists and what they thought as I continue to study a lot of this history. But it's very powerful just looking at the words itself and the actions itself and the things they did. And so I will continue to document that for you guys, and I appreciate everybody for watching. Take care.